Hello, guys. Welcome to Psyched Minds. We are back again with a new book, In Therapy, The Unfolding Story by Susie Orbach, or something. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right or not. But yeah, how conversations with psychotherapists really work. It is recommended for new therapists, beginners. I think it would help. And in general, even for a layperson, it would be an introduction to how a therapy room looks like. I think I am also reading it for the first time. So, Susie Orbach is a psychotherapist, psychoanalyst, writer, and social critic. She is a co founder of the Women's Therapy Centre of London, a former Guardian columnist and visiting professor at the London School of Economics, and the author of a number of books, including What Do Women Want with Lucy Eichenbaum, on eating, hunger strike, the impossibility of sex, bodies, which won the Women in Psychology Prize, and the international bestseller Fat is a Feminist Issue, which had sold well over 1 million copies and been continuously in print in the UK. The New York Times said she is probably the most famous psychotherapist to have set up Couch in Britain since Sigmund Freud. She lives in London and lectures extensively worldwide. That was the introduction about our author and other books that are famous. Okay. For Janet Winterson, again, my quest to share what goes on in the consulting room. Introduction. Turning a full stop into a comma. People come to therapy when avenues for understanding themselves or moving forward stall. They come because love has gone wrong, because they are frozen in unsatisfactory work or intimate relationships, because they have lost touch with themselves, because they are searching for authenticity, because they don't know how to let go, because their life is falling in on them, because they have suffered events so bruising they don't know how to assimilate them. They come in pain, in confusion, sometimes in sorrow, sometimes bewildered or frightened by their behavior, sometimes in anger, sometimes to express grievances. They can be full of words and yet devoid of the ones they need to express the underlying confusions. They can be full of emotions which repeat on them because the emotion that engulfs them is part of the problem, covering over more subtle feelings which don't have a home in the person's sense of self. They can be full of ideas, of theories about why misfortune has befallen them. The work of therapy is to open up these three levels: feelings, words, and ideas. It aims to crack open the existing words, the existing emotions, and the existing ideas. Therapy tries to slow the person or the couple or group sufficiently to hear, feel, and think what they are saying and to have it heard by the therapist. Words and how they are said take on special significance. There may be a few of them with gaps and hesitation in between. They can come tumbling out, and yet what they are saying may misfire, too jumbled to yield their truth immediately. Therapy takes the time to listen closely, to find entry points so that contradictory thoughts and feelings can surface and be acknowledged, so angers can be heard, disappointments felt, anxieties unpicked. In that hearing, a person or a couple can know themselves, their motivations, their feelings, their understandings of self more deeply. Therapy doesn't seek to fix the problem in a simplistic way, although good therapy always addresses the problem that is brought in. Therapy's main aim is to understand, to provide, to context, to indicate ways of thinking, feeling, and being that invite the individual to know more of her or himself, to extend their experience, to intervene in stumbling blocks or hurtful practices, to live more richly. Conflicts may remain but are often transformed. There are always reiterations, but now ideas about the source of the pain shifts about. Where there may have been one word or one emotion to explain oneself to oneself, there may be several words and feelings and even ideas that sit alongside one another. A clamp one didn't know existed is released. Where there once was a full stop, there can now be a comma. And where there was only a past or a future, there can be a present informed by an examined past which can welcome rather than fear a future. The consulting room is a place of reflection, of intense and yet often quiet conversing, thinking, and feeling. The stories here encompass loss, shame, intergenerational conflict, the impact of illness, parenting, challenges of late life, life's disappointments, the role of faith, belonging, love, hurt, achieving, connecting, failing, mothers and daughters, fathers and sons, longing, love, wanting and transitions. Examining these themes as we read along beckons us and the Annalise Sands to find ourselves anew. Susie Orbach, December 2017. Douglas. First session. Douglas rang me, breathless. He had asked around about who he should see as he was in an emergency and he found his way to my consulting room. He's 64 and a portly, a grammar school boy who grew up in the Midlands. Douglas. Hello, Susie. Susie. Hello. Douglas. I'm Douglas. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible and it's quite a way, so I'm a bit pressured time wise. He claps to indicate that we should get started. Susie. So tell me. Douglas. Well, I don't know how this process works. I really don't. I have never done this before. As you know from my email, I heard about you from a friend and I thought I would try this route because I am having some problems really and I wanted to see if you could offer me anything or help me with the problem. It is a problem really with anger which is affecting me in my work, in my life, and well, I need some advice really, some help because I am worried that I am going to damage myself professionally. Really, that's the issue I'm worried about. The way I am in my job and I need some help with this anger issue. I am angry all the time. I am angry in my work. I'm angry with the world and I really need to know what I do with the issues that flood into my brain. Susie. Are you angry right now? Douglas. Well, I am. Yes. I am rather, yes, because I don't know how this works. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to proceed. Susie. Can I just slow you? Douglas. Yeah, sure. Sorry. Susie. I'm intrigued that you said you are angry now because you don't know how it works. Douglas. Yeah. Susie. Could you bear not to know how it works? Douglas. This is all new to me. I have never really talked about this before to anybody, let alone a therapy person, so I am rather nervous actually. Susie. So you are nervous right now? Douglas says he's angry because he doesn't know how this works. I find this useful in getting a sense of how wide the scope of his anger is. To the logical mind, not knowing doesn't necessarily engender anger, so Douglas helpfully gives me another dimension to his anger. Susie. Well, I would like to help you. I would like to hear a little bit more about you. Douglas. About me? Susie. Douglas. Well, I'm 64. My name is Douglas Stepley. I'm a judge. I'm currently sitting on a case at Southwark, Crown Court, and really that's the issue that has brought me here because it is beginning to affect me the way I do my work and it is worrying me. Susie. What is the case? Douglas. It is a case of a chap accused of GBH, grievous bodily harm, and sex trafficking. He is involved in a criminal gang that imports girls, usually from Eastern Europe, and puts them in a massage parlor, some in London, some in Leeds, and he has been arrested for GBH against one of these women. He's a very nasty man and well, I can't really say more about the case, but I'm worried about my reaction to him. Susie. What is your reaction? Douglas. I want to kill him. Of course, I shouldn't say that, but well, it's privileged in here. Susie. Therapists and clients have privileged status unless there is a real danger, in which case reporting may be required. If we learn of an intent to commit a serious criminal offense to harm oneself or others, we may break confidentiality. See, for example, statement on confidentiality. Douglas. Yes, good. I'm furious with him. I'm furious with this counsel. I'm furious with what he represents, the people who stand behind him, who will never be arrested or extradited. Extradited. I'm furious with the way the world is going, and I just don't know what to do with this angst and this anger about things I see on the news and things I see in my courtroom. It is beginning to overwhelm me. And of course, I'm meant to be objective. I am meant to dispense justice in a calm and rational way, and I'm feeling I'm losing my ability to do that. He comes to a full stop. He looks like he has drifted off somewhere. Susie, please go on. Douglas, sorry, I beg your pardon. He pauses again and starts speaking slowly. Douglas, something happened to me last week in the course of this trial that had never happened before. I had to call a recess that went on for more than an hour while I tried to recover myself in my chambers and in the gentleman's toilet, and I couldn't conduct the trial because it was just beginning to overwhelm me. My rage, and I'm worried I'm going to lose my judgeship, actually. Susie, do you know what? Can you remember what exactly happened before you called the recess? Douglas, yes. Susie, what was going on in the trial? Douglas, the man's counsel has called what I laughingly call a character witness, and he was cross examining him on the stand. I found the machination of the defense counsel completely intolerable. The excuses, the mitigation, the excuses for his low level violent bully, and this character witness who, as it turns out, hadn't actually met or seen the man whose character he was testifying for a matter of 12, 13, 14 years. And I stopped the I actually lost my temper in court and shouted at the defense counsel. I abused the witness verbally, and I, as it were, saw a red mist descending, and I just had to leave because the thing is, the defense counsel, he is a very clever, very sly man. He knows me from other cases, and he will, if he can, call for a retrial if I lose myself in that way again. And I'm fearful that I will. He has told his client that he might get away with a suspended sentence. Well, he is going to find that he might end up with a life sentence, and I'm just worried that if it is appealed, which it will be, I might. Susie, because of your anger. Douglas, because of my anger and because of certain other instances in the courtroom where the defense counsel could make a case that the judge is unbalanced. Susie, Douglas, could you tell me what the defense's argument is briefly? Douglas, about his client. Susie, yes, about their client. Douglas, he's saying that he is not really violent, that the instance of violence for which he is on trial was an aberration, that he had a difficult upbringing, that he is a family man with children who would be deprived of their father if he was in prison, and that he actually, and this is the one that really got to me. He actually put him forward as caring for the girls that he's trafficking and being a protective father figure, if you will. And I mean, the thing is, I really want to kill this man. Susie. So, beyond the ethics or the politics, which I can empathize with, is there anything else that might be leading you to want to kill him? Is there something in his story that resonates at another level? This is an open question. It could be he has a niece who is shielding a trafficked young woman, or a brother who married a Thai bride. Therapists are often thought to have X-ray eyes. We don't. We have questions that can turn a mirror on the self. Douglas. Yes, he reminds me of something in myself, I think. It is as though his violence and in a way, his rage, which came out in this attack on this woman, it just mirrors my own, and I think that disturbs me. He, I think there is a type of man that I hate, and I always have hated. I find myself not listening to the evidence but looking at him in the dock and having fantasies of violence against him as though I know him personally, as though he has personally hurt me. Susie. Well, he has hurt you personally in the sense that you experience his behavior as an affront. But I think you are saying something else about that. Douglas. I have a friend who is a vicar, who I mentioned this to in passing, and I'm not really a believer, but I was so desperate I would do anything, talk to anybody, and he said, look at Luke chapter 6, which I did, And I had heard of the words before, of course: judge not that ye be not judged, and do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It is all that stuff which is meant to be the credo by which I practice my profession, and I find that I can't do that anymore. I can't do it in the face of what is happening in the world. I suppose what I want to ask you is, what do I do with all this rage and angst in my courtroom against this man, but also against leaders of the world and violent people in the world who create wars, who create suffering? It is beginning to overwhelm me, and I fear not exactly for my sanity, but I certainly fear for my ability to do my job, because how can I judge him when I feel guilty too, as it were? Even in the few moments of our speaking together, Douglas has become very thoughtful. He's afraid, yes, but he's also questioning how to handle himself, how to make sense of the emotional discomfort he's beset by. I'm a small woman, but I almost feel my physicality expand to meet him so that his confusions will have enough space inside of me too without belittling him. Susie, we are taking about two different kinds of GBH. We are talking about two different kinds of GBH. We are talking about what you feel about what is going on in the world and what he has done in the world. And I'm wondering what you think you have done in the world. Or what have you done in your private world that disturbs you, that is violent and doesn't fit with your ethics? Does that make any sense? Douglas. Yes, I wonder. Sorry, my driver is outside and I need to go. Susie. That's fine, but I need to know in order to be able to be of any use to you, Douglas. Douglas. Mm, well, I suppose we all have secrets, and mine is, as it were, surfacing in this trial, because this man, much as I despise him, is only providing a market, if you will, for men who wish to buy sexual favors from these girls. And that is something I have done, yes. Susie. And for that you hate yourself. Douglas. I hate my anger at this man. Susie. Yeah, I know, but could we just parse it a little better or a little more fully? Douglas. What does that word mean, parse? Susie. Well, we did it in grammar in school. Break down what you are actually saying into its parts of speech. Douglas. Break down? Susie. You said you hate yourself for having taken. Douglas. I hate myself for having given this man a reason to do what he does, and so how can I judge him? Clap. Long pause. I have to judge him because I am a judge. Susie. So as you are telling me this, I am sensing there is another feeling coming across that isn't quite anger. A sense of shame and hurt. Does that mean anything to you? Douglas. Yes, I am deeply ashamed. Susie. You are ashamed of the act and you are ashamed of yourself, and so you can't find any compassion towards yourself. Would that be right? Douglas. I am ashamed of the act, yes. I am ashamed of the hypocrisy that I find myself demonstrating. I'm ashamed of. I find sexual matters very shaming, and this case coming before me has brought that to the surface. I think so. I feel ashamed, and I find that my shame is becoming anger at him, and I'm losing the ability to distinguish between the two emotions in the court. In a way, I should acquit him. Clap. I should give him a suspended sentence. There is no time for me to unpick with Douglas the shame he experiences towards sexual matters. His shame is driving his aggression as though to keep the whole thing as far away from him as possible. At the same time, his identification inclines him to put himself in the same category as the trafficker. His thinking is glued up because we are just beginning to explore these difficult issues. Susie. How much longer is the case going on for? Douglas. About another week. The jury will retire at the beginning of next week, and then I expect he will be found guilty. Clap. And then I have to sum up to the jury, of course, before that, and then I have to pass sentence, which will be 2 days later after that, after the end of the trial. Susie. Well, can I suggest this? Can I suggest that we meet again very soon? Douglas. Yes. Susie. Before you summing up? Douglas. Yes. Susie. I think it is important that you have been able to make the link, and if we can loosen it a little bit, you might feel safer in the courtroom. So if you could come next Monday, Douglas. Yes. Susie. Before court, Douglas. Early. Susie. Yes, come at 8:30. Douglas. I know you are a feminist. I have looked at your book titles, although I haven't had time to read them, and I I am ashamed as well. I hope you won't be angry with me in the way that I am angry with him. Susie. See you next week. Douglas, understandably, is seeking reassurance that I won't judge him. Perhaps the reader is wondering why I couldn't have responded with a soothing word. I felt that this latter remark about my being a feminist was diverting us into the issue of judgment and taking away from what Douglas had been able to talk about just before. I had no wish to add to his discomfort, but I felt that I would be softening the links he had just made for himself. I had offered another session right after that weekend and hoped that would be sufficiently containing. As for the issue of judgment, him as the judge, me as the judge, these fascinating questions are in my mind and I anticipate will be part of what we talk about in the future. Douglas is coming in an emergency. It is often like this. There is no space for history, only the immediate present. Urgency is what drives him, and the question is how the therapist responds to that emergency while knowing that emergencies come and go. I know I can't provide a solution. I can hope, however, even in his first session, to slow things down enough to make some pockets of air in their head so he is less overwhelmed by rage and the fear that he will act inappropriately. Obviously, in therapy, we don't do this by suggestion. By suggesting the individual could take a specific course of action as a colleague might, we do it by trying to expand his thinking, his feelings, and his stance towards this dilemma. I also want to slow him down enough so that I have a way of entering into his world, how his mind, his thinking, his body, his feelings work. If a therapist is to work in any sustained way with someone, then they have to get as close to the experience of the person as possible. They have to walk in their shoes sufficiently to understand. But we have to do this while thinking through the matter, through the manner in which the individual make the links they do, which lead them to full stops. Second session. Douglas. Hello. Susie. Hello, Douglas. Douglas. Nice to see you again. Susie. You too. Douglas. Thank you. So thank you for the last. Thank you. I shall have to be in court in an hour and a half, and I have to sum up, and I have to decide what I'm going to do with this man who I find so challenging. So I'm in a quandary, really, because I want to punish him severely, and I suppose I feel that I should be punished too. And if I am lenient with him, it is an injustice because the man is an appalling criminal. If I am hard with him, I am a complete hypocrite because he is only doing something that I have helped to create. Susie. Could you tell me a little bit more about your relationship to the woman you see him trafficking? Douglas. My relationship with them? Susie. Well, to women who you have brought sex from. Douglas. Oh God. You see, I think I never quite understood why certain things that the world thinks are wrong are wrong. When I was younger, I was guilt-free really about using women in that way, and well, that's not quite true. The magic of therapy is that it allows space for the person to go back on themselves and question their actions and their motivations. Therapy is not a linear process where a line of inquiry is followed sequentially. It is about associations made, the stuck places, the hot spots, the confusion which we come in at in different ways. And while a therapist may ask a question, it isn't the answer per se that is important, but what it can open up for the individual. Susie. Uh-huh. Douglas. My relationship with these girls is quite perfunctory. Of course, because you don't get to know them, but I did have romantic fantasies about a certain girl, especially, but I think in a way that allowed me to feel guilt free because I thought, well, I am treating them as human. I'm not violent. I pay them very well. I asked one of them to meet me outside, which she refused, but I kind of feel that I was humane in my relationship with these girls. But there was one Polish girl who I got to know a bit and who I realized was indeed trafficked. exploited and wanted me to help her. In fact, she was the last girl that I saw in this way. Susie, how recent was this? Douglas, this was a long time ago, 10 years ago. And I feel guilty about her because I didn't quite realize at that time. But quite soon after I realized that she was frightened and in trouble and needing to be liberated from the grip of a man like the man who is standing in the dock in front of me at this trial. And I let her down because I did nothing. I think I was ashamed and embarrassed about the possibility of being discovered, and so I walked away from that part of my life and buried it and left it. And I think it is these girls that I hear about now. This past week have reignited this dilemma within me. I think I wanted love, but I was paying for sex. And I kind of made that right in my mind. Suddenly, the anger has come up again with regard to this man, and it is not right. Susie, because not only does he exploit these women, but he exploits both their needs for love and men's need for love. Douglas, yes, exactly. And that is why I said about your being a feminist or women I have talked to about these things, without, of course, telling them of my own particular involvement. But I find sometimes that certain people, they don't see the man as a victim as well as the woman. Susie, well, I wonder if you could see yourself as a victim. Douglas, yes, I do. But then how can I be your victim? Susie, could you slow down a second instead of rejecting it? This is a new idea for you, Douglas, and would you just consider it for more than a millisecond? Douglas, well, I have agreed with you. I have agreed. I have agreed, you are right. Douglas's voice turns irate. His whole body looks inflamed. Some of his vulnerability has shown itself and made him uneasy. I'm still on the mission helping him see how anger becomes a portmanteau emotion, carrying many different feelings. Susie, I think this is really helpful because you are showing me a piece of where the anger comes from. Douglas, I feel that you are going to judge me and punish me. Susie, I'm actually more interested in trying to understand. And Douglas, I think you are like, it wasn't an accident that I came to you. Susie, what? You came for punishment from a feminist and you are paying me very well. Douglas, you are. I sit up there on the bench and I'm very powerful. And I'm very aware of my power and I feel like a lonely child all at the same time. Susie, and a lonely man? Douglas, yes, but I sit up there and I feel like a preposterous 10-year-old wearing a wig. Actually, not 10, more like 16. With impossible. How can I do this job? How can I judge people's emotion and behavior when I am so confused? And I think I knew you were of a certain type. You are a woman, and I think uh, yes, I don't know. Susie, do you think you really came here to be beaten up? Douglas, I expected. Susie, unless you think that is a form of help. Douglas, no, it is not a form of help. Susie, right, so I think you. Douglas, but I mean, what I did was bad, and what I am doing now is bad, and. Susie, well, I am interested in that, and I hope we will come to understand it, but at the moment, I have got this very strong image, the one you just gave me, or gave us, of the young man sitting up there in fancy dress. Douglas, Susie, as though there can't be a vulnerable part of you at this age, as though you have to somehow diminish your vulnerability and speak of yourself as 16-year-old rather than you as a grown man with a big job who feels vulnerable himself and has complicated feelings. Douglas, I think the difference is that this counsel who is arguing for this man, well, I know things about him. He has a complicated emotional life, but when I hear him, when I see him, he gets under my skin. It is as though I'm looking at an adult with issues, with complications, and he makes me feel like a child, and that is the difference really. It is not like being an adult with vulnerability. I feel like a child sitting there, and I feel the rage, I feel the tearfulness I feel when I had to call the recess. It was like being a child afflicted by a storm of emotions that I had no control over or context or perspective. Susie, But actually, it was very wise for you to call the recess, wasn't it? Douglas. Well, I mean, it wasn't. Susie, you were trying to take care of the situation, trying to take care of Douglas. I wasn't wise. It wasn't wise. I was just. If I hadn't done it, I would have been sobbing in court. Susie, well, I guess that wouldn't have gone over big, so the fact that you knew. Douglas, well, it would have. Susie, the fact that you knew you might have been sobbing actually helped us a lot because sobbing is quite different from rage. Douglas, yes, they go together. Susie, well, do they? Douglas, rage leads to sadness, leads to rage, yes. They live together. One is the reverse of the other, two sides of the same coin. Susie, well, I am intrigued by that because one bit doesn't seem to get much expression. What you have told me so far is that rage is the thing that gets expression. The sob is hidden. Douglas, well, I can't sob in court. Susie, no, I accept that, but I think you are sobbing inside somewhere, and that is almost hidden from you, and that is causing you difficulties. Douglas, Susie, so that's worse than the rage. I don't mean in the public forum, I mean inside of you. Douglas, yes. Now I feel we have done some parsing. We have been able to take part what is bundled up by Douglas's response of rage. We have been able to identify his shame about his past behavior, his disgust at the trafficker, his feeling of illegitimacy to judge another, and his sobs about his predicament. I didn't pick up on what he knew of the defense counsel's complicated emotional life because it would have broken the flow of dealing with the recognition of his own vulnerability, and that was primary. I was interested in what he was seeing or projecting on to the defense counsel that he thought he got away with, while Douglas was best with upset, anger, and confusion. I set that aside in favor of exploring the feelings that came up that constitute his anger. In my first session, Douglas was angry because he didn't know how therapy worked. So now we have some of the elements of the bundle called rage which was carrying him. It is like a pressure sitting on top of a mix of contradictory feelings. Susie, you hurt in a lot of different ways. You are confused, and the rage is a kind of cover story for you, endeavoring to hold yourself together, except it has got cracks in it. Douglas, yes, yes. Susie, we have got to stop shortly. But one of the things that I am thinking about that must make this summing up so very difficult for you is that you want to convey empathy for the girls, the women, but you have kind of empathy deficit in relation to yourself. So you come in with the rage, and that is part of your dilemma. Douglas, yes, because I want to punish him as well. I want to punish him very severely. So, Susie, but is there an interesting way of talking about the women's life that would help you in this? Douglas, in what way? Susie, well, I'm not that off faith with summing up, frankly, but I am thinking about not just the legal kernel here, but the fact of these women who you feel very affected by, who you feel have been exploited, and wondering is there a way of you thinking about them in the summing up? Douglas, yes. Susie, that might allow you some more space so that the rage doesn't overwhelm you. Douglas, yes, I think I have this. I dreamt about it the other day. In fact, I was in court and somebody at the back stood up and said, I know what you have done. And how can I sentence the man? How can I sentence the man? I'm sentencing him for violence, but I am really sentencing him for casual cruelty and lack of empathy. That's the word you said. Susie, yes, but he's there because of GBH, because of the trafficking, the actual rounding up of women and the transporting of them. Douglas, yes, but they. Susie, and the vulnerability of the women and the vulnerability of the experience that you are trying to address. Douglas, Susie, and privately the vulnerability of you and the other men who seek them. Look, we are going to have to stop now. I would like to see you on Thursday, and then if we wish to carry on after this emergency, we can discuss arrangements. Douglas, yes, that would be good, thank you. Susie, okay. Douglas, I shall think of you when I am in court. Thank you. The session felt rushed on reading them, but in the room we had established a rapport which opened up some thinking and feeling space, which levered Douglas out of his isolation and fear. I was moved by his ability to consider what was coming up in the sessions, and I had every hope that he would be able to join up the 16-year-old in fancy dress with the substantial middle aged man he is. Developing some compassion for his own difficulties and naming them were important in the very short term. As our sessions progressed, I sensed that the themes we talked of would be what we would look at in depth as we reflected on his history and the way it had closed down certain emotions for him. I'm aware that the practice of adversarial law is one kind of inquiry and that psychoanalytic therapy is another. In one, to put it crudely, we are looking to judge right and wrong. The crime has to be punished. In therapy, we hear multiple truths with different ways to them. The constraints of his summing up have legal ramification, and not surprisingly, Douglas expects to be judged in the therapy room both because of his work and because he is not accustomed to the modes of thinking in the consulting room, which are about understanding, not judgment per se. That brings us to the end of the case. We will be reading another case of Emilia and Grace in the next reading of our chapter. It was interesting. Well, the case was of emergency. She made him think. She made him think of all the perspectives he could, and he was an intelligent client. So, yeah, we will be reading and continuing with the next case tomorrow. Bye bye for now. If you have any suggestions, any comments, anything at all, you can reach out to me in the comment section of the video you're viewing or in the community section. If you have not subscribed yet to the channel, do subscribe, like and share. Bye bye, take care and keep reading.